Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with Jane Cassie. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, Jane. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks so much for being on the show. Now, you have quite a background. You have a master's in education from Harvard, a JD from Georgetown, and now you're the managing director and co-founder of Loop Abroad, a travel program for high school and college students. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So, my background is in education, all sorts of education, teaching, testing, pretty heavily into testing. But I've always loved to travel as well. I've been to now 59 countries on all 7 continents. And
Wow.
I'm currently in Thailand, getting ready for our 6th year of Loop Abroad. We're going to have about 200 students this summer, and we run programs here with the Elephant Nature Park, focusing in teaching and veterinary and sort of animal and adventure programs. So we have some really ambitious, wonderful, kind kids throughout the summer, and we're getting set up for them to come through here starting in a couple weeks.
Very cool. Now, I know you love to travel. You've traveled lots of different places. Was there a pivotal moment that led you to found Loop Abroad?
Yeah, I had traveled a bit when I could afford to, on and off, all after college. And then I took a year off a couple years after law school to travel around the world by myself. And I was in Fiji, in the ocean, talking to some other people, and I was talking to this person and said, who'd been traveling for 2 years, who I didn't know, I just met on the boat, and I said, what's the best place you went? And I decided for some reason, whatever he says is the best place he went, because he's been traveling for 2 years, I'll go there. And he said, I went to the Elephant Nature Park in Chiang Mai. It was the most amazing thing I ever did. So I booked a week-long volunteer stay at the Elephant Nature Park in Chiang Mai in Thailand, where I'd never been to Asia at all. And I went there and I thought, if I had done this when I was 16, my path would have been so different. I would have seen so many things. And so that was sort of the beginning of, maybe I could do that. I could just bring people here and sort of show them what's out there in the world. And that was kind of the little seed for that.
Oh, wow. So you kind of said to yourself, wow, if I had gone here so much earlier in my life, my path would be completely different today.
Yeah, I had, of course, very supportive parents, and I did well in school and everything, but I had a sort of insular, very small town. Like, I didn't really think of doing anything outside of my town until, I went to college in a different town. And so when I finally started traveling and doing all kinds of things, I thought, there are people who do this when they're like kids.
Sure.
Which hadn't occurred to me as a kid. Like there are people who go out of the country before they're 21 and see things out in the world. And that's something I kind of wanted to be a part of, that idea of opening up those perspectives a little earlier.
Wow, that's so cool. So yeah, opening up earlier in the process, changing someone's life path. But it seems like it must be kind of inspiring for them.
I was going to say, it really is so interesting now that it's been 6 years. We can see all our alumni, what they've gone on to do. And we have kids volunteering with Elephant Projects at Cornell. We have kids who've gone on to vet school. We have kids who are, international relations majors. So it's so interesting to see how those experiences shape, what attracts you along the way.
Totally. Could you tell us a few of those specific stories? Are there any students that come to mind where you've seen them really kind of change their own paths after this experience? Any kids come to mind that you've worked with?
Yeah, one thing, if anyone's interested, if you look at our website at Loop Abroad, you can see some different news stories of kids who've traveled with us and stuff they've gone on to do. We had a student who traveled with us 5 years ago, who went on to write. He self-published a book about ways teenagers can contribute to the world around them, which was so cool. And it had all these very actionable ideas for service projects and small and big sort of ways you can get involved. And that was a long effort for him. I think it took him a few years, but it was really impressive to see how he pulled all that stuff together and sort of implemented it in his community. And we've had a number of kids who've come back with us, a second year. And the Elephant Nature Park has a program where you can become an elephant ambassador for them and share, how different wildlife is treated and how it relates to tourism when you get home. So we've had kids present at their schools, about what to look for when you're traveling, what to sort of keep in mind, how to be a mindful and a good environmental traveler. And those are some of the most, impactful, because they're talking to 1,000 kids who wouldn't otherwise know that, who also talk to their parents, who also talk to whoever. So that's how things in the travel industry get changed.
Sure, no, absolutely. Kind of bringing those stories back to the U.S. Walk us through some of the steps that, a student takes. They arrive at the Elephant Nature Park. What happens next? And then what happens next after that?
Yeah. So what happens is their trip sort of starts when they go to New York and they meet their team leader and they get on the plane, because we do all supervised flights. And so when they get here, most of our programs, our biggest program is a veterinary program for kids who think they want to be a veterinarian. And so it has 2 weeks. 1 week they spend at the Elephant Nature Park, and 1 week they spend at a dog shelter here in Chiang Mai with a veterinarian. We bring a U.S. veterinarian for their group that they have at their disposal the whole week, whose job is to teach them. And so all throughout those 2 weeks, when they're at the dog shelter, they're doing all kinds of classroom work and sort of hands-on clinical work to learn all these different skills with their vet. When they go to the Elephant Nature Park, they're volunteering in a way that sustains the park. So the park is sustained by about 100 volunteers all the time, which rotate by week, who come and do everything from, shoveling elephant poop, cutting up elephant food, planting trees, planting food, to providing medical care and things like that. So it's a really interesting mix of sort of hands-on time. And also, I think the biggest part is being around, seeing how a project like that gets born. Like, Elephant Nature Park's only 12 years old, and it's one of the most respected and leading conservation projects in the world in terms of what they've been able to do with respect to saving elephants and other wildlife in Asia. So it's really a large part of the trip is being around other people who are, in a sense, living their dreams and doing what they think is important. And I think for all students who are interested in going into veterinary medicine, but maybe particularly for girls, it's really nice to have adults around who've been through the same thing. When you're hearing a lot of people say, vet school is really competitive, it's really hard, like biology, it's tough, to have someone around saying, yeah, it is, but you can do it if you do the work. Like, people have done it before you, and you can do it too.
No, absolutely. Getting that hands-on experience and working with other veterinarians who've already been through the process and showing you what you can do and how this is a possible and achievable goal.
I always have had, but over the years, I have a lot more sympathy for high school students, especially ambitious high school students, because it's very hard. I always tell our students, it's really the only time in your life where you don't get to pick the rubric on which you're measured. Like, after college, even in college or after college, you can sort of choose where you want to excel. Maybe you excel in having a family. Maybe you excel in a certain career. Maybe you really love, analytical stuff. Maybe you're more social, whatever it is. In high school, you don't get to pick that. You're supposed to win every rubric, and every comparison is like, you got an 84 and I got an 83. You beat me. Like, it's very direct.
Right.
There's not any, there's not any ambiguity. So it's so much pressure, and you're so young, and people are saying, like, what do you want to do? And you're like, how could I possibly know that? I haven't done it. I haven't tried any of
Yeah, sure.
So, I think it's really helpful to have some time around people who acknowledge that, who accept that, who understand that it's hard and all those things, but who say, you actually can, you can just start and figure out something you might want to do and try it. And if it doesn't, you go to the next thing and the next thing, and you just stay on whatever path that is. And it's encouraging to be around.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. This is definitely something unique and something different. Now, I know that there's a lot of programs out there that send kids abroad. They spend a lot of money on a program. They go overseas, and sometimes those experiences can come across to college admission officers as being kind of prepackaged.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, what are some ways that students who do this sort of program can kind of make it their own and make it unique in some way, and showcase that they're not just doing this to get into college, but they actually care about what they're doing?
Right. Well, that's a very interesting question. I think very important. And honestly, anybody who's listening, who's planning to go on any kind of paid for trip abroad, or might go on one, or has gone on one, it's so easy to really play that card wrong in your college admissions process and end up having it hurt you. So I think there's a few things to remember. Excuse me. The first is, with anything you're putting on your college application, that the only bar to getting into it was writing the check, is automatically not going to be impressive. So if the only criteria for enrolling in your trip was mom and dad wrote the check, that's going to have no value. The fact that you went on it alone is going to have no value to anyone reading it from the admissions perspective. Our trips have a pretty complex application, including 2 academic or professional references and an essay and a transcript. We only have a 60% acceptance rate. So just the fact that you've enrolled and been accepted tells an admissions counselor something.
Sure.
And that's an important thing, I think, to look for, because it also changes the sort of caliber and commitment of students that you're around in the program. That said, you can certainly do something that you just pay for and sign up for and get a lot out of it. You get perspective, you make connections, you get to see and experience things you wouldn't otherwise. But as far as admissions goes, when you're going to try to tell that story, the only parts of it that are interesting, that have any value, that show anything about you, that tell anything about you to an admissions counselor, are the parts that you brought something to. So if when you go home, you've been talking at libraries or schools in your community about what you learned, or if when you go home, you independently arrange a fundraiser and you raise money and you donate it to the village you were in, or whatever it is, something that you have the impetus to create, or you and someone else, or you link up with someone when you get back or before you leave and do some research, or whatever it is, some piece that you've brought to the table. I always really caution students and we spend a good amount of time on this actually in the summer when we get our students ready to become Loop alumni and leave and go home, with how to sort of use this trip going forward. When they talk about this, when you talk about travel in a college admissions application, especially if you've decided to write your essay about it, which I caution against, actually.
Really?
Yes, pretty strongly. And I can tell you why in a minute. But if you're going to talk about it on your application, you have to be wary of being real about your motivations. And I always tell students, look, when you come to Thailand for 2 weeks with us, you are going to have the effect of helping dogs in the dog shelter. You're going to have the effect of helping elephants at the Elephant Nature Park. Your money is going to support them. It goes to great local organizations that are respected here, that are rooted here, that are culturally sensitive. They're all those things. And it has a positive impact. But let's be honest, that isn't why you came. Because if that's all you wanted to do, there's a better way with your, $3,000 or whatever it is to help elephants and dogs than you coming here and learning about them. You came for you, and you're supposed to, because you're 15 or 20 or 21 or 17, and you're deciding to be a veterinarian, or that you care about animals and you want to learn about them and the world and become more invested in that cause. And that is an important, worthy, good goal. But if you try to spin it as, I went there and I saved Thailand, I went there and I saved these elephants or these kids I taught in the village, or whatever it is.
Sure.
It's embarrassing to everyone, and it just rings really hollow. And I've seen those essays, and when you're looking at them from the admissions side, they don't look good either. The other classic sort of admissions essay that you want to miss is like, I went to this other country and I learned how privileged I am. Honestly, you should know how privileged you are by now without leaving the country.
Yeah, plus admissions officers have heard this all before.
Oh man, have they heard it, and they're sick of it, and they're not impressed that you realized as a kid who can afford a $3,000 trip and has summer vacations and lives in America and is healthy and whatever else, that it took you till you were 17 to realize that like you're better off than most people and you should appreciate the little things like that's not only is that not impressive, that's like, again, sort of embarrassing for everyone. And then the other essay you get, which also is bad, is I went to this place where people are impoverished, and I saw how happy they were with what they had, and I realized that like you don't need fancy things to be you can almost hear the essay, right?
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing for the person who's written it, because they're basically saying like, I looked at these people who would really probably like to have all of the things that I have access to and benefit from, and decided that because they're leading a happy life within the limitations they've been born into, that they are more blessed than me, and that that's enough for them. Like, it isn't. You have the benefit of the developed society where you can go to a great hospital and you can get on your iPhone and you can apply to whatever college you want to go to. And you're kind of supposed to want that for everyone else, not look at them and say like, oh, but look how happy they are in their hut, so they're perfect.
Right. So like it's okay that they have less money.
Yeah, it's okay that they have that because they're so happy, and they're so happy with simple things, and like that's what I should take away. Okay, if you take that lesson, that's fine, but that's not an insightful college essay. So I think it's very hard to have your college admissions essay be about a trip you went on, a missionary trip, a service trip, a learning trip, whatever, and have it be unique in any sort of way. It can happen if something really interesting happened to you, or if it's not about the trip as a whole. If it's like you were traveling with someone else who's from a different town and had different beliefs than you, and one day you had breakfast with her and it was so interesting, that's an interesting vignette. I'm interested in reading that if I'm an admissions counselor. If it's like I went to Thailand and I learned people are different and I am privileged and I saved the world, that's not interesting, and also kind of cringeworthy.
Right. So you're kind of suggesting if you're going to write a vignette, it should be like unrelated to the service aspect of the trip in particular.
It should be small.
Yeah.
It should be a moment, and then relate to something outside the moment that's about you as a person. I think people forget with this essay that this is a chance you have to tell something about you. Yes, you want to write a nice essay, but it's really one of your few chances to show your humanhood. You're sort of different than anyone else. And so you want to stay away from and there's some nice lists online of like what not to write your college essay about, but anything everybody writes about, my grandmother or grandfather died and I reflected on whatever. I won the big game and it was hard. No, that's not interesting. No.
Right. So what are some ways that some specific examples of students you've seen who've been able to communicate the meaning of the service trip and of the experience and what they got out of it through the college essay or through some other aspect of the application or letters of recommendation that you've seen students kind of communicate that to the admissions officer?
Yeah, so I won't agree with, sign off on, give the thumbs up to, whatever, any college essay about a trip. I just think it's too hard, don't do it. So every time someone sends me one and says, can you look at it? I say, it's terrible, don't write it. No.
Okay.
It's a bad road. Don't write about grandma. Don't write about grandma or grandpa. Don't write about a sports win or a music win or a debate win or whatever, where you got a trophy. And don't write about your trip that you went on. Just don't. Find an interesting moment in your actual real life where you live most of the time and write about that, is what I think. But that said, there's other places on your application. You obviously want to mention you went on the trip. You obviously want to expound on it. I think the key is to do something with what you learned. And here's where the quality of the trip comes in, right? If you went on a 2-week service trip to Costa Rica where you mostly hung out at the beach and you like painted a house,
right,
it's pretty hard for you to, I'm sure you had fun and it's not like a bad thing to do or anything, but there's not a ton of value to wring out of that. So you have to kind of fight to find it yourself. But I think the thing to do is, if you're going to go on a trip don't go on any trips for admissions purposes.
Exactly.
There's a lot of reasons. I obviously love travel. There's a lot of reasons to travel. There's a lot of value in it, especially for young people. I think it's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly valuable. But if you're going because you're like, oh, this will look great for my application, once you start that sentence, you're not going for the right reason. And you could do something better with your money and time for the 2 weeks if all you care about is getting into college. But if you've gone for some reason that matters to you and now you want to put it on the application, tell them the hours you spent and what you spent them doing, because we want to know it wasn't a vacation, right? So like, for example, our kids in 2 weeks, they get 80 service hours because they're like at the thing all day outside in the dirt working. And and getting a lot done. And they also cover a lot academically that they can showcase in an application, cover letter or a resume. So when we have our college veterinary students come in, when they leave, they can make a really clear list of, I learned to insert catheters, I learned to do blood draws, I learned to calculate anesthesia, I learned to monitor anesthesia, I learned to do restraining and approaching, I learned to do 3DX, 4DX tests, whatever the list is. It's not, I walked around and observed a little. It's the more you can quantify what you did, the better. And then I think the other point is to do something with it either before you leave or once you get home. So to make some sort of connection and say, well, now that I've done that, so what? So what am I going to do with it? Because experiences, the real value of experiences, right, is you learn and then that changes you in some way, and then there's some kind of output. So like when we do conservation projects during our trip, during our 4-week trip, the only requirement is there must be some kind of output. You can't like write a paper and just keep it or like give it to me. That doesn't do anything. So you have to, publish it online or share it on a blog or make flyers and hand them out or write to travel guides and get them to change how they're talking about something, or something that leaves you and goes into the world with what you've learned. And I think the same is true from an admissions perspective. If you've done this travel, like what are you going to do with it? So are you going to now look for a research position in this field? Or are you going to volunteer with a veterinarian at home? Or are you going to stay in touch with the place you volunteered and support their efforts, or however big or small that is? To keep that thread going, I think adds a lot more value than just a one-off, like I went on a trip and then I came home and forgot about it.
I love it, Jane. So many valuable nuggets in what you just said there, because obviously the service trip can definitely be inspirational and a valuable experience, but lots of people have been on service trips like this, and as you said, lots of cliche essays come out of that. So the idea of doing this because you want to do it, and then doing something of your own accord that is unstructured and not packaged in any way, where it's just you're the student, you actually care about this topic, you went because you wanted to go, and now you're bringing it back home in some way into the real world of your ordinary life, in your own experience, in your hometown, or in your home city, and doing something different and unique as a result of this trip. I think is really what's going to stand out and show you didn't just do this for admissions, and it's not going to be a carbon copy of a million other essays just like it.
That's right. And I also think, it's very important, again, for your learning experience and from the admission side, when you're considering the different options of trips available, to look at how they talk about it, and also to pick out their reputation a little bit. There are definitely organizations that have a reputation as more of a party trip, and schools know that because they've seen it. I'm generally cautious of trips that are any sort of tour that tries to package it to you as this is an academic trip, colleges will love it. Like you're going on a tour around Europe and you're going to go to 10 museums. Therefore, it's an academic trip because you're seeing things and colleges will love it. A, that's not an academic trip. It's not academic to go to a museum. It's interesting and cultural, but it's not academia. And B, no, colleges won't love it. You can love it and you can learn a lot from it. And that's reason enough to go when you're 15. Like you're not supposed to do everything just to get into college. You have to make yourself too. But any program that's pitching you that your tour therefore is academic and therefore colleges will be so impressed, that's a lie. That's not true. And so what it makes you think like, do you really know what this world is that you're selling me? Because no Stanford admissions officer has ever opened up an application and said, well, this person went on a 2-week tour of Europe, that's amazing, we have to have them. Like that's never happened in the history of the world.
Yeah, of course, exactly. And the fact that it's branded as for admissions purposes will kind of lead you to not necessarily have the correct, truly unique inspiration that will lead you to do something cool afterwards.
Right, that's right.
The trips that are not packaged as admissions purposes, it seems to me they're more likely to actually lead you to have some sort of insight that will get you to do something cool afterwards. Or perhaps put you on a path towards finding your own inspiration as a result.
I think the college admissions world is a world where there's a lot of snake oil and there's a lot of people saying like, just do this and then everyone will love it.
Yeah.
And I'm wary of any of that. Like, I think there's not really any sort of magic pill.
There's not a formula. Yeah.
Right. There's not a formula. and when it comes to travel, I think the thing is to find a program that you think says that's the one I got to do. I got to do that one. I need to know more about that. I have to do it for whatever reason. That's always going to lead you to a better place than, trying to pick the most prestigious one or the one that says the most about admissions or whatever it is. Just there's enough of them out there, and they're all, and some of course are better than others, to find the program. I'm a real big believer in authenticity in travel and in sort of everything. And so we maybe to our detriment sometimes are sort of very authentic and direct. And like if parents call and say like, well, what is this going to help with her college admissions? No, it isn't. In terms of vet school, it might, because with veterinary school, the AVMA really wants you to have a certain number of hours with experience with both a veterinarian and with animals. And this is something we directly provide. So in that case, I can say absolutely yes, it exactly does. But in terms of like coming in high school and helping at the Elephant Nature Park, no, that alone that's not going to impress them. That's not why you should be coming.
It has the potential to develop you as a person, which then may lead you to do something else.
Oh, I think it has great benefits for you, and you might take something from it and do something amazing with that will help your admissions. But if anyone tries to sell you, if you just go on this trip, that's going to really help you get into college, I would almost be able to say that's always untrue.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're about the authenticity chain. I think that's so important. Not enough folks are. So I'm really glad that you're honest and direct about that. And I think that definitely there's a variety of programs out there, and folks really have to do their research into what are their own reasons for doing this. Absolutely. And what will be the value provided by the trip.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So thanks so much for sharing those points. I want to shift gears now and move into my favorite part of the interview, which is the lightning round. I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. Don't worry. There'll be rapid-fire questions. You can be rapid-fire responses. Nothing too tricky. Are you ready?
Yes.
Great. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process, or for the process of finding a trip that's really meaningful?
Yeah, so for the college admissions process, it's something I kind of already talked about, but anything that you can get on your application simply by your parents paying and signing you up for it is you should not do. So any of these awards they try to sell you, or get your name in some book, or be in a program that accepts anyone who paid, don't do any of that. It looks bad, and it looks, it's just tacky, and it doesn't, it hurts you. It doesn't help you.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to success?
As honestly, having spent the last month doing all the sort of managing, directing stuff that I do, I feel like this is shining out to me right now. Read the directions. Read the directions. Especially with the college, when you apply for college and they have that huge pile of people on their desk, they're not, for the most part, looking for a reason to keep you. They're looking for a reason to kick you out of the pile. And so missed deadlines, typos, little errors, wrong email address, those things, even if you think you care, those show very clearly you don't care about this and you don't want it. And so, for example, when I'm making decisions about giving out financial aid, which is a decision that I make, people who read the directions get more money from me, because they're going to do what I say when they get here. They're going to follow the directions on the trip. They've proven something about themselves. You read the directions yourself. Don't have your parents read them, and then actually do what they say and pretend it matters. And the human being on the other end, or the computer, actually, because computers like when you follow directions, will be so happy that you followed the directions that you'll set yourself up for much more success.
No, for sure. Filtering is a difficult process. And like you said, your program has a 60% acceptance rate overall. So you got to get through those other 40% somehow.
Yep.
Definitely. What's one online admissions resource that you absolutely love?
I guess I would say College Confidential. I mean, I know it's sort of a cliche at this point because everyone uses it, but it's so big that there's just so much information right from the people at the school. And I tend to not care that much about the information a school itself puts out, because all that has a tint of what they want you to see. And when you're hearing from the students there, and College Confidential is one easy way to do that, you're getting sort of the real deal, which I think is always more valuable.
Definitely. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without, and why?
So the book I love, and we keep them here in Thailand for kids to use, is called The Student's Guide to Colleges. And then there's a subtitle like The 100 Top Schools written by the students who attend them or something. But the main title is Student's Guide to Colleges. It's a big yellow book, and it gives you, I think the biggest thing people overlook when they apply to schools is like trying to match their vibe, trying to find somewhere where they'll fit in. Yeah. These are going to be your friends, potentially your spouse, your coworkers, your connections for a long, long time. And sometimes you just go somewhere and you're like, nope, it looks good on paper, but this is not me. Like, I don't like it here for whatever reason. And I think that book does a very concise and good job about kind of giving you a feel for what type of kid goes to that school. And it helps you be like, yeah, I'm not going to like that at all.
Yeah, sure. Getting that fit.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for joining us, Jane. What's next for you? What are you working on these days?
Well, what's next is I've got my first group of kids coming over. I shouldn't call them kids because our oldest students are 23, but I think of them as like my kids, We've got almost 200 students coming through this summer. So what's next for me is getting everything ready for them so that they'll be, really, really have a good experience. So lots and lots of work, but it's really great. They get to, it's kind of an everybody wins situation because our students come, they learn a lot. The veterinarian has a great experience with them. The animals get helped. The good organizations here get supported. So if anyone wants to know more about Loop Abroad, they can check out loopabroad.com for lots of information there, or feel free to get in touch with me at admissions@loopabroad.com anytime.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us today, Jane. So many valuable insights about traveling abroad and abroad programs. So really appreciate your time. Take care.
Sure, of course. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.